one of the most oldest and bureaucratic institutions in the world. So let's give her a round of applause.
Hi. So my name is Courteney Ervin, and I am a developer at the New York Public Library. I do not work on the website, so whether it's accessible or not, it is not my fault. Today, we're going to talk a lot about library cards. So just to get a sense of who's in the room, raise your hand if you live in New York State or city, or put your hand up. I know some of y'all live here. Or if you work or go to school in New York City. Raise your hand. Okay. Now, keep your hand raised if you also have a New York Public Library card. Oh, some of y'all put your hands down, all right? Great. So if your hand is still up, you're one of the 2.2 million people who have library cards in New York. And this is like a very diverse group of people. And I highly recommend, if you don't have one and you're eligible, that you get one. You get free lynda.com access, free ancestry.com access. It's lit. Cop one, please. Okay? Now, 2.2 million is a lot. There are a bunch of startups out there that would climb over people to get this kind of usership. But there were 8.5 million people in New York City, living in New York City alone, at the same time that number was taken. And there were over 18 million people in New York State who are also eligible for cards. And that doesn't include commuters or students at all. And you know how many people from Connecticut and New Jersey, like myself, commute in every day. So today I'm going to talk about the process of digitizing the library card process and kind of thinking about it as a case study in nonprofit technology. It's important that you know how to get a library card before we talk, how you used to get a library card before we talk about how we improved the process. So what used to happen is you'd go online, and actually you can still use this process. You fill out a form with your identification, and then you have to go into the library and find a helpful librarian, and you show them proof that your form was accurate. And then that librarian finds the form in the system, makes sure, double checks, and then gives you an actual library card, right? And so many tech companies make their mint by kind of making an inefficient process more efficient and digitizing a process. And so we wanted to do the same thing for the library. We thought that we could really lower the barrier of entry and lower the burden of people coming into the library by making it a digital process and creating an API to do that. And I started working at NYPL almost a year and a half ago, and I'd tried a few different career paths before that, including working in nonprofit administration, so managing volunteers and events and things like that. And when I graduated college, right before I started that career, I wanted to change the world, right? And we all know that this is a very easy thing to do, so I figured I'd just like hop into the nonprofit world and get it done. And I think now I have a lot better perspective on that, but I've always wanted to use my skills to make the world a better place and to improve society. And I love doing work that doesn't have a revenue bottom line, right? And that's one thing that the library is great at, because your library cards, they're free, okay. And the thing is, most nonprofits don't have dedicated development teams. So I was really excited to join the NYPL team because nonprofits don't usually make technology for themselves. More often than not, they're using these kind of third-party systems that are usually not perfect, like the systems that Maurice was just talking about, the sorts of things that aren't quite made for what they're being used for, and people are just struggling to make them work. And as somebody who's been on the other side of those systems, they really suck. So I was really glad to be making something really specific to the library, and I, in the meantime, kind of saw a lot of differences between the two technologies, industries, so between nonprofit and technology industries. Right? And so the nonprofit sector and the technology sector are really, really different. And they're funded really differently, so they make decisions differently. So where technology is sort of like move fast and break things, fail fast, fail faster, nonprofits are more like move slowly and protect the mission, and they're really avoid risk. So think about this. If your annual salary every year was dependent on 1,000 strangers liking you enough to give you money, would you move fast and break things? It makes sense, right? It makes sense to move slowly. So let's look at how some of these differences play out in the library card app. It's known as Card Creator. That's what I'm going to refer to it as. And let's think about it as a case study, like I said, in what it looks like for a nonprofit to make a tech product. So round one, it took 9 months. Wasn't me, my colleague Mauricio started out, and we just wanted to kind of test what it would be like to make this happen. And so the first system was kind of mimicking the physical process. You would use your phone to take a picture of your identification, your driver's license, and then you would submit it through the application. And from that, you'd get a temporary card. And later on at the library, some librarian would go through and check your driver's license against the information in your application. You'd get a card. And doing this work, my colleague had to use a really old system called the ILS. And if it sounds like it's from the 90s, it is. It means Integrated Library System, and that's about how old it is. So 25 plus years. And so there's no documentation for that system, right? You have to go and talk to the person who administers it to figure out how it works and what it needs. And so Mauricio had to go and talk to that developer and figure out how he could make a library card from a different application. So the first lesson here is to listen and understand, right? So listen to the nonprofit organization and understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And my colleague had to figure out how to put those library cards in, and the only way to do that was to talk to someone about it, right? And if he didn't do that, he would not have been able to make his project. So if you want to create technology for an institution, accept that the institution knows more than you do, right? They know more about their problems than you do. And so you need to go in and find all of the stakeholders and talk to them about what they need. And for Card Creator alone, we've had to talk with at least 4 different departments, from ops to marketing, right? And this is pretty familiar, but it's very, very specific in nonprofit because you have to go and seek those people out. They're not coming to you to make the product. And having those conversations, they can be really frustrating, right? Like Mauricio's like, where's the documentation? Why are we even using this? The question of why do we even have an ILS has come up many times, right? But we need it, and it's a part of our core infrastructure. And so you either work with it or you don't get to make things. And keep in mind that like one person can solve a problem alone, right? But wouldn't the problem be better with 2 people or 20? You know, having more people means your solution is going to be more robust. Okay, so it's done, it was great, we're finished, right? Not quite. We missed one critical component, and in round 2 of development, a different colleague of mine, still not me, Matthew, took on the valiant mission of securing the application. So NYPL had a security auditor come in, and Card Creator got caught up in this, and the decision was that it was insecure to kind of hold these even temporary files of driver's licenses on some server somewhere and hold people's addresses. And the thing about the library is that one of our promises to you, our patrons, or soon-to-be patrons, is that no one's going to know your reading history, right? Privacy is a really big deal for the library, which is kind of great thinking about how they're the last cultural champions of privacy at a time when Time Warner can sell your information to anyone they want. Sorry. So in this case, there was no reading history, but privacy is really a core component of what we do. And so my colleague took a month and secured the application, made sure that temporary files and addresses were deleted at the time that the card was made, at the time the card was approved. So the minute a librarian was like, yes, this person has a permanent library card, everything was deleted completely from the server. Great. Now we're finished. Okay, so the lesson we learned here is to specify and share what we're doing. And what we did was we didn't go to all of the stakeholders, obviously, right? We missed somebody, and that's why we had to add this feature. And last-minute feature changes happen in every industry, but they're really, really expensive at nonprofits, especially if there aren't a lot of tech people there, if there are not a lot of developers. It can be very, very costly. And this particular constraint was almost the end for Card Creator. It was almost a reason not to take the risk, right? And the other thing about specifications is that if you approach a nonprofit right now and you're like, I want to do free technical labor for you, which people do, right? They're like, I just have some extra time. I want to make an app for you. What do you want? They are going to come back to you with a long list of things they need, right? And the thing is, they probably don't need all of those things. If a nonprofit comes to you and they say, oh, we need our own mobile app so that people can donate on their phones, that's probably not what they need, because who's going to download that app, right? Maybe what they need is a more responsive website. Or maybe what they need is more payment options, right? But they probably don't need their whole own mobile app just for donations. So the other side of lesson 1 is about understanding and figuring out and working with your clients, working with the people that you're building this product for to better understand what they actually need. So in our case, privacy was really and truly a part of what we depend on. And so we delivered the requested changes. All right. And card creator wasn't done, right? So there were some organizational shifts, and the person who was in charge of library cards changed, and so we had to wait 6 months for that person till one person leaves, somebody else come get settled in, and then we finally got a review of the app, and they said, listen, we don't want people to have to go in and approve every card. That seems like a lot of work. What we'd prefer is for this whole process to be automated. So now all of the features of the app have changed. What ended up happening was we had learned from our previous mistakes. We went and we were like, okay, we get it. We're going to start over. What do you need from us? And we listened and we understood. And my team lead went back and made flowcharts detailing how the application would work. And before I even got started, he basically had them approved by everybody in the process, right? So look, we're done. This is the last time we're doing this, and we're going to do it right. And we incorporated applications for commuters and students, right? Because now you don't need a driver's license to take a picture of to be a part of the process. Instead, we just kind of check your address against this third-party system and prove that it's a real address and that it's actually a place where you live, and then we can give you a card without even needing your driver's license information at all. We don't hold the addresses anymore. They just come through the system and are approved, and then you get a card. So it's really great. And the whole process took another 6 months, but we could reach more people. And by the end, we had this authenticated API that our mobile e-reading app, Simply E, which is the product that I work on, could use to create cards in the app. And so the third thing to consider is maintenance, right? Who's going to do the work of keeping your app running? Nonprofits are really less likely to have a robust engineering staff. I mean, the New York Public Library is huge, and there's maybe 17 or 20 of us, and that's unheard of for most nonprofits. So keep in mind that if you go into a nonprofit and you want to make something to help them, you need to think about who's going to keep this up and running when I'm gone, right? And keep in mind that you're talking about a much broader swath of people that you may be helping. Earlier we heard about oncology and health and things like that. The results of a broken or outdated application could be someone's life. It could be life-changing for another person at the very least, right? So don't just drop in like a superhero, this is a picture of me actually, and create technology for a nonprofit without considering who is going to take care of it. And maintenance can look like a ton of different things. So if you're at a nonprofit and you want a lot of people to be able to use your app, accessibility, making the app accessible can be maintenance. If you need other developers to work on the application, documentation, making something open source, having a positive community, all of that is maintenance. If you know that there's only one ops person and you want them to be able to keep the site up, making easy deployment a possibility is maintenance. And good analytics are maintenance if you're trying to get money and keep this thing funded and find another developer to throw on the team or something like that. All of this counts as maintenance, but think about all of it. All right, and now I want to take just one step back and let's think about the one overarching lesson here, right? So 9 months plus 1, and then 4 additional months to make sure that this contract had gone through. It took over 2 years for this app to be finished and incorporated into Simply E, which would just launch last week. You should definitely download it. You can get, if you put your hand down during that earlier exercise, you can get your library card through the application. And so the lesson here is to be patient, right? If you're trying to work with a nonprofit, it's really important that you are thinking about the long term. And this is in direct opposition with startup culture, where pivoting quickly is a point of pride. So keep in mind that nonprofits do mission-driven work, and so the benefit of being patient is that you get to impact more people and have more longevity potentially for your work. If the library says they're going to do something, they have to do it for a long time. They can't just say, oh, we're going to do it for like 6 months, but then like we're good. It's an institution. It's going to be there for a while. And so there are a lot of lessons to be learned, but they aren't just relevant to writing code and social good, right? We said listen and understand, specify and share, consider maintenance, and be patient, right? And those are all lessons that are relevant to all software. So when you write code to solve real problems and to support real people, that makes you a better developer. So looking back at these differences, you could easily consider the latest food delivery app or smart juicer to be just yet another privileged attempt at an IPO. And nonprofits are doing the deep change. Or you might consider nonprofit organizations backward and bureaucratic, while technology is actually solving the real problems and getting it done fast, right? And there's this dichotomy of slow and bloated or fast and careless. And so we might consider the two industries to be adversaries. But actually, I think we should break out of this dynamic, right? What if instead we thought about technology work and the processes that it uses as kind of the information for nonprofit efforts, right? A way to support the work that nonprofits do without the risk that nonprofits would have to take on to do it that way, right? What if technology was the dynamic, fast-paced R&D department of all nonprofit work? I think that ultimately software is for solving problems. And so do we have bigger problems than poverty or climate change or education? Right? Shouldn't we be using software to solve these problems? And shouldn't we be using the information that nonprofits have from years and decades of work to support it? Just a question. The missing piece, I think, is applying the lessons learned from tech problem solving to the institutions that are most familiar with them. And this could be the best way for both industries to kind of move forward together. Okay, so card creators incorporated into Simply E. It's being used now, and I've handed off the code base to another team at the library that's trying to get it ready for the web. And they're using React, a Facebook open source front-end platform, to make some components. And they're using user testing techniques from tech companies. Okay, so you can do a lot to increase your impact, but there's a chance that some of the code you're already working on may be used by a nonprofit now or in the future. So I think that this is really a great way to move both sectors together, forward, and into the future. Thanks, that's it.